come
Secretary
to tear this country
Rubio,
apart.
I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job who snatches her off the street.
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the
national
security consequences of people, masked men on the streets, snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to America First, the channel where we don't sugarcoat the truth, we expose it. We are the voice of real patriots, the people who love this country, respect its laws, and refuse to let it be torn apart by radicals pretending to be public servants. Before we dive into today's explosive topic, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of clarity in a time full of noise. We're growing a movement that tells it like it is, and your support is how we keep fighting back. Now, let's get into what just went down on Capitol Hill, a fiery exchange between Representative Pramila Jayapal and Secretary Marco Rubio over the revocation of a student visa. The student in question? A Turkish citizen named Romea Osturk, here on a student visa at Tufts University. She co-authored an op-ed, nothing particularly new, but what followed is where it gets serious. Based on that op-ed, her visa was revoked. Then, masked and armed federal agents detained her on the street and transported her to a detention facility in Louisiana.
Representative Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. On March 21st, 2025, the State Department approved the revocation of a student visa for Romea Osturk, a Turkish citizen who is a graduate student at Tufts University, apparently simply for writing an op-ed. According to an internal State Department memo, you took this action under your discretionary authority to revoke visas, and soon after you revoked her visa, armed and masked plainclothes officers snatched Ms. Osturk off the street and transported her to a prison in Louisiana. Mr. Secretary, do you really think that Ms. Osturk's op-ed results in a foreign policy consequence for the United States?
I believe that case involves someone whose visa we never would have granted had we known ahead of time.
I'm not asking you that question. I'm asking you if you think an op-ed, but that's exactly, in fact, what happened. The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Osturk's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities that were a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Osturk's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
So, but is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you,
Mr.
while I have the authority, I will continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says. And that means that you are trumping the legal supreme court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has a right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country apart.
Secretary Rubio, I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job who snatches her off the street.
We don't do
If
the
these
snatching,
are
but I can tell you we do the visa revocations,
Let me
and
ask
we're
you
gonna
about
keep
the
doing them.
national security consequences of people, masked men on the streets, snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So
Because
you
we
so
know
you
when we've
think that
seen-
U.S. agents who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting
I
some
can't
of the
speak
most
to law
some of
enforcement
the
functions. We're
country's
not a law
most
enforcement
dangerous
agency.
criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked?
Again,
Is that
that law
accurate?
student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So
We
you
deny
revoked her
visas every
student
day,
visa
and we will
on
revoke and
based
continue
on
to
an
revoke
op-ed,
visas.
which trumps the Supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up
You
here to stir
clearly-
up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't
They're
do any of
guests.
that. She wrote an op-ed.
Well,
She
that's
wrote
what
an
you
op-ed,
claim.
and I'm talking to you about her
That's her
particular
lawyer's
case.
claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
You reclaiming my time. You revoked her student visa
Yes,
because
proudly.
she wrote an op-ed.
And
Would
we'll
you
do more. We're
revoke?
gonna do more of
I
them.
have another question for you. Would you revoke the visa of someone in the United States who published claims that quote Jews are an untrustworthy and dangerous group? Yes or no?
We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest
Are
who's
you
here to stir up
going to
trouble.
revoke the visa of somebody who made
Send me
that?
the case,
that,
I'll look at it.
that
I'm looking
statement?
to
Well,
get crazy people out of
actually,
our
it's not
country.
just about revoking.
Forward
You
to
actually,
revoking the visas
Secretary
of any
Rubio,
lunatics you
excuse
can
me,
identify.
reclaiming my time. Can you explain to me why the Trump administration granted refugee status to Charles Kleinhaus, the white Afrikaner who tweeted that exact statement that I just said? There's the case.
That's not a visa.
You granted that person
That's
to
a
enter the
totally
United
different process.
States.
That's someone that applied here through a totally different process.
Secretary Rubio,
student visas are a privilege.
Secretary
we deny
Rubio,
them all the time, and
you
we'll revoke them.
revoked
And
a visa based on an op-ed, and then you allowed for
Gentlelady's time
masked
has
men
expired.
to
That's your
snatch
claim. That's
somebody off
accurate. That's
the
your claim.
street.
Your
That's
time's
your
expired.
claim. That's
Cue the outrage machine. Jayapal jumped all over this, accusing Rubio of trampling on the First Amendment, abusing his authority, and treating a foreign student like a criminal for daring to express her opinion. But let's take a step back and ask ourselves, what is really happening here? This is not a First Amendment issue. The First Amendment applies to American citizens. It ensures that the government cannot restrict the speech of its people. But we're not talking about a citizen. We're talking about a guest in this country, someone granted temporary permission to be here under very specific conditions. When you come here on a student visa, you agree to abide by our laws, respect our values, and avoid engaging in activities that might threaten our national interests. That's exactly what the Secretary of State has the authority to evaluate. Marco Rubio was crystal clear about that. He explained that the Immigration and Nationality Act grants the State Department the ability to revoke a visa if they determine that the person poses a potential threat. And let me be clear, that doesn't mean someone has to plant a bomb or hack a server. If someone is stirring unrest, spreading hostile ideologies, or showing signs that they're here to undermine our country, that's enough for action. That's not fascism. That's common sense national security. But Jayapal doesn't care about national security. She cares about weaponizing identity politics and victim narratives. She tried to twist this whole situation into a human rights scandal. She played the same tired card the left always plays, that revoking a visa is equivalent to censorship. But let me ask you, if you go to another country and you criticize their government in a way they find threatening, what do you think happens? You get kicked out. That's how sovereign nations operate. We are under no obligation to host people who use their welcome as a platform to attack the country that let them in. Jayapal went on a tirade about masked federal agents, saying it was outrageous that they wore face coverings. She asked why law enforcement officers in this particular case had to conceal their identities. And Rubio's answer was spot on because they're dealing with dangerous radicals, not just individuals being detained, but the unhinged mobs who target officers, dox them, and threaten their families. The left wants law enforcement officers exposed, vulnerable, and restrained, while the people they're dealing with get every benefit of the doubt, and then some. Jayapal then tried to trap Rubio by throwing out a loaded question. Would you revoke a visa from someone who wrote that Jews are dangerous and untrustworthy? A despicable thing to say, no doubt. Rubio responded that he would consider revoking such a visa, depending on the context, and she immediately tried to accuse him of selective enforcement. But here's the kicker. She conveniently ignored the fact that her own party has been silent or even complicit in tolerating open anti-Semitism on campuses and in public forums when it fits their political agenda. She even dragged in a separate case entirely, someone allegedly granted refugee status under the Trump administration. But again, that's not even the same legal framework. Refugee status and student visas are apples and oranges. But Jayapal doesn't care about legal accuracy. She cares about scoring political points. Let's call this what it is, the left's attempt to blur the line between citizenship and foreign privilege. They want you to believe that anyone who sets foot on American soil is immediately entitled to all the rights, protections, and freedoms of a U.S. citizen without any of the responsibilities. That's how you lose a country. That's how you let foreign influence, ideological subversion, and anti-American sentiment fester inside your own borders. Rubio stood his ground. He didn't back down. He defended the rule of law and the principle that America has the right and the obligation to decide who comes here and under what terms. That is not authoritarianism. That is basic national sovereignty. This is why we need strong leadership. We need men and women in power who understand the difference between compassion and weakness, who won't let their moral compass be dictated by Twitter mobs or campus radicals. America is a nation of laws. It's a nation that welcomes people from all over the world, but only if they respect our values and don't seek to undermine our institutions. So here's the bottom line. If you're a guest in this country, act like it. If you're here to learn, learn. If you're here to grow, grow. But if you're here to wage ideological warfare under the guise of academia or journalism, then don't be surprised when your welcome is revoked. And to the American people watching this, stay informed. Don't fall for the narratives crafted by these radical activists posing as representatives. Watch the hearings. Read the laws. Think for yourself. Because this battle is no longer just about policy. It's about whether or not we have the will to preserve our nation in the face of coordinated attempts to destroy it from within. Thanks for tuning in to America First. We'll keep bringing you the truth they don't want you to hear. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. The fight for our country is just getting started, and we're not going anywhere. Stay strong, stay free, and God bless the United States of America.